Education is changing faster than ever. We can't ignore the research that shows instructional practices rooted in evidence lead to better outcomes for students and stronger school communities. At Educational Innovation 360, we partner with educators and leaders to elevate teaching through personalized instructional coaching, data-driven professional development, and student-centered teaching strategies.
Ed Consulting, we bring deep expertise in strategic planning, organizational transformation, and leadership development, ensuring the whole system is aligned for success, equity, and sustainable improvement.
Together, our goal is simple: to support schools and districts in transforming learning so that every student and educator can flourish. Stay informed, stay innovative, stay student-centered. Subscribe to Educational Innovation 360's YouTube channel to get the latest news and updates.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Johnson of Transform Ed Consulting, and I am honored to have with us this afternoon or morning Helene Alalouf. She is an educational consultant of Solve Consulting, New York, New York. She brings decades of urban classroom experience and informed commitment to collaborative and collegial coaching as an instructional coach and as one of the first National Board Certified Teachers, the highest certification a teacher may obtain. As an educator steeped in inquiry since earning a master's degree from Teachers College, Columbia University, she employs strategic professional learning and individual and team coaching to build teacher proficiency in standards-based unit and lesson design, student engagement and agency, assessment and feedback, and data-informed decisions. She also helps administrators, teachers, students, and families attain their educational goals using virtual platforms and AI tools. Her most recent activities include raising student proficiency on state ELA and math assessments and producing episode 168, Teaching Beyond the Bell Curve, on the New Teacher Talk podcast. Welcome, Helene. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure.
You've got a wealth of experience. Tell me or tell us about the kind of coursework you completed while at Teachers College.
I was originally supposed to be a math actuarian inspired by NASA, but calculus was a stumbling block for me. So my advisor asked me what my passions are when I wasn't striving to understand a calculus lecture. And I told him about how reading has always been my GPS, how female protagonists have inspired me and giving me information and wisdom about relationships and decision-making and impact on society. So I knew that I wanted to do something that would make life better for people. In all modesty, I'm not the Messiah, but I wanted to make a difference. And teaching seemed a logical place because I love school and I love learning. And at Teachers College, I was blessed with professors that pushed me to ask questions, not just to do things procedurally, but to really understand the why and the wherefores. And with that, I was totally unprepared for actual teaching because my first position was with Upward Bound. These were students of color, they called them at that time, who had potential and were not achieving in the regular traditional classroom. And here I'm thrown in, just 5 years older than my high schoolers, and I didn't know how to teach them. So I found a magazine called Oasis for Gifted and Talented, which had all of these inquiry-based and project-based and student choices. And that's what I gave them. And my students blossomed. So that put me on a path to give students choices and to be clear in what I am teaching and to create a community of learners.
Well, Helene, you know that I'm from New York and I actually attended New York City public schools. And I recall Upward Bound, and maybe it was different when I attended. It was meant for students who were college bound. Maybe it was college bound. I don't quite remember, but yeah, maybe it was called college bound. I'm not sure, but I attended New York City public schools. I graduated from Julia Richmond High School, which is what, 67th Street, 66th and 67th Street. Anyway, you live in New York right now. Where do you live in New York?
We're by Grand Central Station.
No
so
kidding.
It's a wonderful location. I can get to the schools in Brooklyn where I coach. I can get to the family in New Jersey. And of course, walking the city is one of my passions.
Wow, I'm impressed. And you know a lot about team coaching and professional learning. How did you develop that background?
Funny you should ask me, David, because I learned through trial and error as well as research. Going from retirement, the Teacher Center, where I had mentored national board candidates and I had presented professional development and I had trained the mentors in their mentor program. Cynthia Adams was the director of the White Plains Teacher Center. When she heard I was retiring, she said, "No, you're not." And she got me a position for 3 years as the differentiation coach in the White Plains secondary school. So I was in the middle schools and in the high school. And I made a lot of mistakes initially by putting too much information to the teachers I was working with. So I learned cognitive coaching. I did some research. I went to graduate school to take a course on action research, because when I did the survey, I realized the teachers were implementing the differentiation strategies that I had shared with them. and they were implementing them effectively, but not judiciously and not deliberately in alignment with what their goals were. So I had to learn that three-legged stool of everything corresponding and aligning.
Well, I am so impressed. I am so impressed. Well, our topic today is optimizing student learning. We have 4 bullets here: instruction, interaction, assessment, and identity. Where would you like to start?
Let's go in order, because
Okay.
the first thing we do as teachers is we do lesson plans, even if they're given to us by the curricular resources. So what I want teachers to know, David, is that even if you're given a plan or you find one from AI, you need to think about your knowledge of students, your knowledge of pedagogy, and what are your outcomes? What is it that the students can discover on their own? And what is it that we have an obligation to explicitly teach? I admire the work of Dr. Anita Archer, who wants explicit modeling to be interactive. So she engages the students with questioning and turning and talking and applying and error analysis. I also admire Christina Smekins, who has a different attitude about explicit instruction. She says, when I talk, you just listen. Students aren't taking notes. They're not turning and talking. They're not asking questions. She's the expert on the stage and she's modeling. So I show teachers both approaches and I say what fits with your personality, what fits with your students' needs. But when you're doing explicit instruction, you need to model what it is, how to do it, and why it works. And
all right, so let's jump in at instruction, explicit modeling. Well, tell us what you've already started. So let's go into greater detail about what explicit modeling is.
It could be having an anchor chart. It could be using a think aloud. So if it's a math problem, or if it's a science data chart, or it's a social studies document, whatever content area you're using, even in art, the teacher is thinking aloud. What am I seeing in this problem or in this text or in this document or in this image or in this lab report? How am I making connections? What questions am I asking? How am I annotating? And annotating, David, is not highlighting and underlining. It's those marginal notes where you're writing down what the schema and the gist is what you're taking away.
Now, you're saying the teacher is doing the annotating or the student is doing the annotating?
Well, in explicit modeling, the teacher is annotating and doing a think aloud to show the students, this is how I'm making meaning. So I'll do the first part, and then in guided instruction, we'll do it together. And I'll open the floor to questions and errors, and I'll applaud the mistakes that students make because that's how we learn. And
there's a term for that, and I'm not getting it right now. When you think aloud, and the purpose of thinking aloud is so that the students can hear your thought processes and how you got from A to B and so on. Do you remember the name of that term when you think aloud?
It might be cognitive processing. It might be cognitive rehearsal.
Okay. And again, the purpose is so the students can hear your own thought processes and how you solve the problem, so to speak, how you apply problem solving to the particular challenge, academic challenge, let's say, or the particular incident that you're reviewing.
Absolutely. I can remember as a 7th grader struggling with reading comprehension because we would have these questions to answer, the multiple choice questions, and I couldn't figure out what the answer was. And the teacher would tell us the answer and why the others maybe were wrong, but I didn't know how she got that. And it wasn't until I was teaching college students about reading comprehension and themes and thesis statements. And the students would say to me, well, how do you know that? How do you see that? And that's how I learned about thinking aloud.
Cognitive processing. And see, that's exactly what it is. Your thinking out loud allows them to hear your cognitive processes. Wow.
Including if I make a mistake.
Including
So,
if you make a mistake.
I might have an interpretation, and then the next sentence I read, or the next document I read, or the next, or I make a visual for a math problem, and then I say, wait a minute, I thought that this was the schema. I thought I had to subtract, but I really have to divide. So I'm showing them that it's okay to revise your thinking. That's the value of those pre-reading, during reading, and after reading strategies across all content areas, David, because when you make a prediction, you're reading to see if those predictions are confirmed. And if they're not valid, you revise your thinking. So when students give a wrong answer, I don't tell them to change their answer. I tell them to change their thinking.
Okay, very good. Now let me hit you with one here that's might be coming from left field.
Okay.
There's a lot of conversation about neurodivergent thinkers.
Yes.
Now, let's say you and I are alike in the way our thought processes occur. That cognitive processing that we just discussed, would it be different for someone who is neurodivergent, for those who are neurodivergent?
Yes, and I would even say, based on Dr. Mike Rose, that we all have learner variability. So it behooves us, what is called universal design for learning.
Yes.
When I am presenting a lesson to students, I am not presenting it one way. I'm not presenting it only auditorially. I'm also using visual. I may use a 1-minute clip of a video. I may have the students walking around in a gallery. I may have manipulatives on the table. So to meet the neurodivergency and learner variability in all of our classrooms, teachers need to think, what other ways can I present this? What other ways can I say this? And how can I say it in more than one way so that I can connect those different ways? So for example, in mathematics, here's what it looks like, what the math story looks like with these manipulatives. Here's what it looks like when I draw a visual model, whether it's on a number line or a data table. And here's what it looks like when I write it algebraically or graphically. But I have to show them how all three modalities are connected to each other. And by doing that, I can reach all the students. And that's one way of optimizing learning for all.
Very good. Very good. How about the what, why, and how of that particular bullet? We spoke very well about explicit modeling, and we spoke very deeply about aloud, reading aloud, thinking aloud. How does what, why, and how fit into instruction?
I'll give you one specific example, if I may, David. I coach teachers in mathematics, among other subjects, and we have what are called anchor charts or instructional aids that may be published by companies or designed by teachers. So in the anchor chart, the teacher may have a word problem and an algorithm of how to solve it. What I would recommend is that for each step, there is a side-by-side column that labels what is the operation, why are we doing that, what is the outcome or total or number that or quantity that we need in order to solve the problem, so that the problem itself is annotated and labeled, the schema pattern is designed, the equation is there, the graphic organizer is there, and then when we're doing multiple methods of solving a problem, for example, different ways of adding, all of the problems are the same quantities, so students can see relationships. Okay. That's the what and the how, and the why is so that they can make those connections.
There was a period where teachers were advised to begin each lesson with the what and the why, and then of course the lesson would include the how. So where does that fit into explicit instruction?
So this is a debate that's currently happening in many of the New York City schools where I coach, and what's happening is that we want to start the lesson with discovery. So students are given a problem and asked to draw on prior knowledge, draw some visual representation or an equation, and try to solve it. And then when they share out their thinking, that's when the teacher steps in and does the explicit instruction. That's called upside down mathematics. But more importantly than that is we have to recognize what our students are bringing to us, because as John Sangiovini says, if it's not productive struggle, it's destructive struggle. And we don't want to further destroy the confidence and the identities that students have as mathematicians. So we have to make the discovery fun and relevant, but also scaffolded and supported in a way that doesn't destroy their potential.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Our next bullet is interaction routines for equitable, structured, collaborative discourse. That's a lot of words. What does it mean?
Well, let's take it one by one. Interaction means that the students are engaged. Engaged doesn't mean busy activities and fun activities. The activities are aligned, the questions are aligned, the tasks are aligned, all to the learning objective of that lesson and unit. So interaction means that you have at least 3 times in a 45-minute lesson opportunities for students to turn and talk. And they're not talking about the football game or what they got for Valentine's Day. They're talking about the problem, or they're talking about the objective, or they're using the vocabulary, the academic language that they need to understand the text. Routines means instructional routines. I'm not talking about routines of where you put your coat or lining up for lunch or fire drill. I'm talking about instructional routines which give you a structure and a protocol so students have a way of making sense. Again, let me give you an example that I used in math and science and in ELA that resulted in one of my Brooklyn schools, elementary grades 3 to 5, went from 48% proficiency to 61% proficiency. We use the mathematical language routine called stronger and clearer each time. Again, this is, although it's called a mathematical routine, David, it can be used in any content area, even music composition. So what happens is students answer the question, solve the problem, read the text, whatever they have to do, and then they partner. So let's say, David, you and I are partners. I read to you and show you my solution or my response, like a constructive response. What you do is you think, what did Helene do that I did not do, that if I were to include in my response, it would make my response stronger and clearer? You can ask me questions. How did I come up with that? Why did I say that? Why did I start with that? Why did I end with that? How do I know I'm right? So we have a set of questions to support the accountable talk. You make a note on your work, not copying my work, but you make a note on your work. What can you do? For example,
So they're annotating as well.
right. You're annotating your work, but you're also making a note on the bottom of, I could add a model. I could add academic language. I could add proof that my answer is right. I could add a rebuttal and refute that. And then we thank each other. And then you have a chance to share your work, even if it's exactly the same. The repetition is very important for students with special needs and for language learners to hear it again and to reinforce it. So you present your work to me, and I do the same thing. I acknowledge what you've done. I compare it to what I've done, and I make a note on the bottom. Maybe I didn't have a concluding sentence in my response. Maybe I didn't have complete sentences. Maybe I didn't have a model. I only had the equation. Whatever it is, I make a note. We thank each other. Then you find another classmate. I find another classmate. We repeat. And depending on time, you can do 2 or 3 rounds of this, not more, because it gets too tedious. Now, the critical point, David, you come back to your seat. You think about everything you've seen from your peers, and you revise your work to make it stronger and clearer.
At one time, there was a term called share pair. And how does this differ from share pair?
So when we tell the students to share pair, some teachers have the thinking first and then the sharing with a partner. That's the pairing. Some teachers have groups of 6 starting with the thinking and sharing, and then they go into groups of 4, then they go into groups of 2, and then they do their own writing. So you can do the writing or the thinking or the annotating or the problem solving before or after the pair share. What I advocate, based on what I've seen with teachers who struggle with this, is that students need protocols and structures for that.
And that's the routine that you speak.
And that's the routine.
Right. Now, when you spoke about routine earlier, you applied it to math. Would you say there are routines for other subject areas?
I advocate that the mathematical language routines published under the Principles of Mathematics Instruction at Stanford University are applicable across all content areas. And I know this to be true, David, because I have done this. I have applied them in English, in social studies, in music, in art, in science. I haven't applied it in phys ed yet, but I could apply it in health because they are structures. Kagan, K-A-G-A-N, also has about 200 cooperative structures. They built on the work of the Johnson brothers on cooperative learning. So you don't want students just cooperating in group seating. You want the task to be truly interdependent and collaborative. But you also want students to work on something on their own as far as they can get with scaffolding support as needed, and then hear what others say. So in building thinking classrooms, the advocacy is for random grouping, not skills-based grouping, because that's how you grow. My mother pushed me to go into the special progress classes where I skipped 8th grade because she knew if I was with students who were better than me, smarter than me, if you want to play tennis, you play with a partner who's better than you, you excel.
So wait a minute, I think I misheard you. You're saying random is better than being with
Skill-based.
Skill-based. Random is better than skill-based.
On the tier 1 instructional level. When you get to tier 2, then you're doing your interventions, then you can do skill-based and guided instruction. But initially, you want the wealth and the community of ideas from everyone. Because you might see something, David, going back to the neurodivergent, you might see something and present it in a way that I hadn't seen. I remember one time, David, if I may share a moment, I was walking around the classroom and a student was erasing her work, again in math. And I said to her, excuse me, dear, could you show me what you did? She had solved the problem a different way than the teacher had, but because it didn't match what was on the board, she thought she was wrong. So I said, let's bring your work up to the document camera and let's ask the class to figure out what were you thinking because you saw it differently than everyone else. We know addition and subtraction are inverse. So instead of adding on, she took away. But she was right. But we don't always anticipate that. So I want teachers to analyze the document, do the science experiment, write the research paper, solve the math problem, and anticipate what are the different ways and approaches and strategies that students will use, and what are their misconceptions. And then how can you put that into your instruction so that you are responsive rather than reactive?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, our next bullet is assessment, feedback loops for metacognition and agency. Please, Helene, enlighten us.
There's a big push for assessing during learning. When I went to school, maybe when you went to school, David, we did our work, we copied the notes from the board, we answered the questions, we took a test at the end, and that was it. It was the summation of our learning, and it was autopsy data. There was no going back, there was no revision. Formative assessment, as many of our colleagues would know, is assessing in the formation of, in the process of learning. So even when I'm doing explicit instruction, if I have a lot of different, let's say, forms of matter, I might stop after each of the 3 forms of matter to check for understanding, to do a turn and talk, to do a fill in the blank, to experiment with something, to make an inquiry. So formative assessment, checking that the students understand so that we don't wait for the end. There's a favorite program on Teaching Channel, a short video. It's also on YouTube. Leah is an 8th grade math teacher, and her strategy is my favorite, N-O. She presents students with an entry ticket, a task. She collects the work. She categorizes them, students with full understanding, partial understanding, and far to go. She takes one from the middle, puts it on the board anonymously, and said, what does the student do well? And the students acknowledge. Where does the student not have an understanding yet? And that's Carol Dweck, the growth mindset, not yet. And she addresses that. And by doing that, she is being responsive and proactive so students know what to avoid and how to do better.
Now, who's doing the critique? Are the classmates doing the critique?
Yes, she leads it. She facilitates it. If they can't see it, then she guides them to it.
Right. I understand that's a pedagogical approach in Japan, that students present their work on the board, let's say, and the rest of the class will critique it.
Yes, and that is my favorite strategy for raising student proficiency on state assessments for the schools that I coach in, because we take in New York State, the Department of Education, has released forma tests and student work. So I will present a partially credited response in ELA or in math, and I will point out through explicit instruction what the student did well and what's missing and how to fix it. Then I'll give the class another one and we'll do it together. And then I'll give them a few examples in their table groups and they have the conversation. What would they rate it? Would it be full credit, partial credit, no credit, why, and what advice would they give the student to improve? All of that is non-graded. It's in the formation of understanding the success criteria, of working on the concept, developing the skills.
I'm going to come from left field again. And this is the question.
I've got my bat ready. I'll try to roll it. If I can, I can. Yes.
What would be the purpose of a quiz? Now, I'm a guy with a background in assessment, and I have my own thoughts, but I'm asking you somewhat to confirm my own thoughts and my own beliefs. So what's the purpose of a quiz?
Okay, so I worked with a colleague, David, who gave a quiz every Friday, and after 10 weeks, he had the report card grade. I'm not a believer in that, okay? My grandson is in high school, and he has a quiz every single day in science. I think that's anxiety-ridden, but he's doing well. He loves science. Okay. Quizzes can be graded or non-graded. If they're graded, they're part of summative. You can't revise. If it's formative, you can revise. When we do exit tickets at the end of a lesson, or you could do it even in the middle of a lesson after the teacher's explicit instruction just to check the understanding, there are various ways of doing that. It doesn't have to be a 50-question quiz. It can be something like from the writing revolution, the because, but, so. So mitosis and meiosis are similar because, mitosis and meiosis are similar but, meiosis and mitosis are similar so. So the because, but, so is processing. I had students, when I taught social studies, explain to me in an image the 3 branches of government. One student drew three critters, and I said, what is this? And the student said, 3 branches of government, executive, judicial, and legislative, but they don't talk to each other. That showed me that he doesn't understand checks and balances, that he didn't understand. But another student drew a pencil. I said, please explain. The stem of the pencil is the executive branch that carries out the law. The graphite is the legislative branch that writes the law. And the eraser under Marbury versus Madison is the judicial review of the constitutionality of the law. That student understood. So that kind of a quiz, and that's substantiated by Marzano's research on instructional strategies for academic achievement. That strategy of analogies or metaphor shows students' understanding. So I would rather do something like that than a traditional quiz. But again, if we're thinking of assessment for learning by Stiggins, we want a variety of questions. So if you're going to give a quiz, you'll have 2 multiple choice, 2 fill in, a true and false, and a short response. That would give, because, and I just found this out, David, and you're the expert on assessment, you might know this better than I. Boys do better on multiple choice questions and girls do better on constructive responses. So if you only give one kind, and that's old research. When I did a workshop for Houghton Mifflin many years ago out in California, and I had to do some research on gender-based instruction and how to make it equitable. This was before the big push to equity in social emotional learning. So when you make up a test, make sure you have a variety of questions so that, again, that neurodivergency. I can't respond in this one with the multiple choice, but I can respond and fill in the blank because I know what I'm talking about.
Now, Helene, I got to tell you, I asked that question about the purpose of the quiz because there are a couple of times you use the term check for understanding. And see, I would argue that a quiz, in fact, the way you the example you gave fits into my thinking about a purpose of the quiz, to check for understanding. I believe a quiz should be formative. That is a check. In fact, your words are feedback loop. So for whom is the feedback loop? Is it for the teacher or for the student? Or perhaps it could even be for both.
So I'll give you one example of the feedback loop for students within a quiz situation. And this I got from Julio Penagos, who works for Solve Consulting. In fact, he's one of the founders. On a Google form, you have Regents type a state assessment question. And if the student got it right, he sent on a different pathway than the student who had an incorrect answer. So you can have these pathways in the Google form, and there you can have the teacher recorded explanation or something to read or a short video, and then the student tries again. So that's the feedback loop. I'm giving you information, what you did well and what you need to improve, but you have the opportunity to improve. I don't think in our pressure to cover so much curriculum, David, I don't think we give students enough time to revise their thinking and their learning. So if I made a mistake on this quiz and I don't have an opportunity to confer with you to understand, where did I misunderstand? What didn't I do right? Did I do anything right? And have another chance to practice or retake, that's when the learning will transfer.
All right, two words in your bullet: metacognition and agency. Describe metacognition and its purpose in assessment. And actually, you just described it. That's why I wanted to go back to it. You just described it, but go on, please.
So metacognition, cognition is thinking and meta is self. So you're thinking about your own thinking. So going back to, let's say, a math problem, okay, I had the wrong answer. So why did I have the wrong answer? I didn't capture the quantities. I didn't convert the units. My answer doesn't make sense given the situation. I had to have a smaller or a larger number based on what was going on. So what strategy did I use? Why was it or wasn't it effective? And what do I remember for next time? So going back to that stronger and clearer routine where we partnered and I learned what you did that I could make my work stronger and clearer, I would say that for metacognition to apply there after the conversations and the revision, that there is a reflection. And the reflection is what I did well. Next time I have to remember to include blank. This is important because that gives students empowerment and agency.
Aha! I was going to ask about agency. Where does agency fit into this? Agency is that by metacognition, and then you use the word reflection, which I'm taking as the summary as a result of the metacognition. And the agency is when they decide how they want to use what they've learned or what they've concluded.
Yes, they own the learning.
They own the learning. Okay. All right.
And
Helene, we have one more bullet here, but go ahead, finish your thought, please.
Sometimes the assessment can give students agency in another way, David. You can give choices. As a result of what you learned in today's lesson, David, would you like to draw an infographic? Or would you like to write a summary? Yeah. Or would you like to demonstrate which of the problems or answers in your classwork today best shows what you learned and why did you choose that? Almost like that portfolio labeling when the students select what they want to highlight as their best work to show growth.
And that is another example of agency, where the student has charge, has decision-making authority to direct how he or she learns and demonstrates the learning.
And if it's project-based, some of my teachers ask me this, Helene, if I have 6 options for project-based on a tic-tac-toe or choice board, do I need 6 rubrics? And my answer is always no. Your rubric is based on the objective and standard that you want to assess. The creativity and the technology enhancement, that can be maybe 10%. But the bulk of the rubric is still based on what knowledge and skill you want students to demonstrate, regardless of how they demonstrate it.
Okay, very good. One more bullet: identity, professional growth for continuous reflection and refined pedagogy. This one is aimed at teachers themselves.
Yes, and going back to the feedback loop, teachers also want feedback from their students, David. And that's what led me to the identity issue, because I would ask my students, so how was the lesson? Did you enjoy it? Was learning fun? Was it challenging? Because you want to have rigor as well as engagement. And they would give me feedback. There was too much to do, or we didn't understand, you weren't clear enough, or could you write this anchor chart over, or could you give us an example? So when it came to, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but when it came to the end of the year, sometimes my principals would say to me, you write your annual evaluation, you know what you did. Well, I wanted feedback. So in 1993, the National Board for Professional Standards was established, and teachers and educators and business organizations all contributed to creating a set of standards. And teachers were invited to become candidates for the certification, vision of Albert Schenker, our union president at the time. Just like when you go to a doctor's office or a lawyer's office and it says nationally board certified, have you ever noticed that? He wanted teachers to become nationally board certified. So I was one of the pioneers. I was invited to assess the standards, to put together the portfolios, to take the tests, and I was one of the first 3 in New York State and the first 60-something across the country in 1995 to become nationally board certified, and we were invited by President Clinton to the White House in recognition. So for my professional growth, I wanted to know, how am I doing? I need that feedback too. I need to know, and it's not that I'm looking for praise, David. I'm really a humble, modest person, but I want to know, what am I doing as an instructor and as a coach? Is it working for you? And if not, what else can I do? Because I take that responsibility. So when teachers are presenting lessons, both in the planning, in the delivery, and in the reflection, I invite everyone to think about what went well, what could be different, where was it supposed to go, and what's my next step? And that has to happen continuously. And when I was going through the national board process, I didn't have time for that kind of reflection. So I would take Post-it notes and make quick notes to myself and put them on my lessons. So on the weekend, when I was doing my writing for the portfolio, I'd have a chance to think about that. Refine pedagogy, because that reflection makes you better. That feedback makes you better. If you try to lose weight and you don't go on the scale and you're not measuring your clothes or trying to get into an outfit that was worn 4 years ago, how are you going to know? You need that feedback, right? I think that's really important for our identity as successful teachers.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. All right, so here. Whoops. I want to make a change here. There we go. If you would bring that back to identity, when you use professional growth and reflection, is the purpose to better identify ourselves as a professional, as a human being, as a thinker, as a teacher? Where does identity fit into this?
I'm laughing because when I was retiring, I was so scared that I would lose my identity. I'm always a teacher. My daughter-in-law says to me, stop being a teacher, just be grandma. I don't know how. We'll take you to walk in the city, and I ask the grandkids, look around at the architecture, look at the people, look at the stores and the restaurants. Ask me a question. Because Albert Einstein's mother used to say to him, did you ask a good question in school today? And I want questions to come from them, because that shows me that they're thinking, that they're interacting. So for me, for Helene, the identity of Helene and the identity of teacher is inseparable. But what I had in mind here is what Danielson calls in Domain 4 the professional responsibilities. Teaching is not like any other job. You're dealing with human beings and potential, and I have a sense of urgency, because everything we say and everything we do impacts the children and the colleagues that we interact with. So I hope that everyone will take this profession seriously, and every plan, every delivery, every feedback, every interaction is intentional. I was enamored with Chaim Ginott, Ginott. He wrote Teacher and Child, I believe. He has a phrase that I am the humanizing influence. I'm the decisive factor in the environment. I'm not paraphrasing it right. I should have it memorized by now, David, because it was in the front of my plan book for the 32 years I was in the classroom. But it basically says that I determine whether I will harm or humiliate a child. So that deals with identity.
The kind of teacher, the kind of person you would be.
And you need to be mindful of that if you want to optimize learning for all students.
I had a buddy just last week, one of my friends from our undergraduate days, who said, always an educator, said this about me. And I agree with you. If this is in your bones, in your blood, you don't just leave it at
I don't want to shut it off.
Yeah.
That's why I'm delighted to be a university professor. doing the podcast and writing a chapter for new teachers. I mean, these are new things that I've done in the last few years, and it's very exciting. I'm happy to share.
Helene, we have covered a lot of topics, and you are certainly a fountain of knowledge. I'm so impressed with your knowledge about pedagogy. And I'm sure anyone watching this and hearing you would say the same. So if you could boil this down to a basic takeaway, what would it be?
Be intentional. Be deliberate, be thoughtful, anticipate. If I do this, if I teach this way, if I give this assessment, if I pursue this professional growth opportunity for myself, what will be the influence that I have? And how can I be better?
Mm-hmm. And call to action. What do you want people to do with this knowledge?
Please look at these 4 areas. Please look at how am I teaching and modeling? And am I doing just the what? Or am I also doing the why and the how? And the what if? Am I giving students an opportunity? Because they say the one who's doing all the talking does the most learning. So students need a chance to talk to each other. But you need to teach them how to do that accountable talk respectfully. Assess all the time. You know, you walk in the street, you always have your radar on. You're always watching who's going. In New York City, you have to watch the bikers and the pedestrians and the cars and the Ubers. You have to watch. Otherwise, you're going to get hurt, right? So in the classroom, you have to watch. If that girl is sleeping and that boy is twiddling, maybe they're still listening. Like, you know, in Socratic seminar, not everyone can talk, but they get something out of it because they're good listeners. But you want to be aware of your students. You want to be aware of the impact of everything you say and do, verbally and non-verbally, because most communication is non-verbal. And grow. Find out something. I don't know how to use AI, or I don't know how to use Excel spreadsheets for data charting to make data-informed decisions, or I don't know how to use virtual trips and simulations to bring them into. So find
that's
out.
the call to action.
That's the call to action.
That's the call to action.
Still register. I'm going to say 10. It may be more. Workshops. On Thursdays once a month. I'm with the Math Collaborative coaches around the country. EdWeb, ASCD, free professional learning. Universities, free courses. Take something that you want to know better. Do better. Be inquisitive. Learn. Grow. And
So
that's how doing it.
if people want to know more, if they want to contact you, how do they do so?
I'm on LinkedIn or helene.alaloof@gmail or helene.alaloof@Solved Consulting.
Well, thank you very much for being our guest today. And I got to say, you're my fellow New Yorker, and I enjoy hearing your Bronx accent. So Helene Alaloof is an education consultant. She's with Solved Consulting out of New York. And she brings decades, obviously, of urban classroom experience and informed commitment to collaborative and collegial coaching. Thank you for being our guest. And I should do a shout out for Transform Ed Consulting and Cassandra Williams of Educational Innovations 360 Degrees. She is the brains behind our video cast here. So if you want to know more, you can find us in LinkedIn, or you can go to our websites. It's a pleasure having you here, Helene, and thank you all for joining us. Have a good day.